Hi, today I'm going to talk about our project related to child-directed speech, examining the impact of variations in speaking rate on word learning. So firstly, I'm going to provide a brief introduction about child-directed speech, also known as CDS. CDS is usually characterized by a slower speaking rate, higher pitch, and larger pitch range compared to adult-directed speech. In the current study, we are focusing on the temporal quality of CDS, which is the speaking rate. It was found by previous research that the slower speaking rate in CDS was related to better online word learning outcomes and larger vocabulary size in children. To explain the facilitation effect of slower speaking rate and together with the other prosodic modulations in CDS, Fernald proposed the idea that CDS is a kind of hyperspeech, where the caregivers intuitively adjust their speech quality to be helpful and provide perceptual advantages to children, considering that children are immature listeners. Although many research have explored how CDS differs from ADS, few have looked at whether caregivers modulate their speech further inside CDS. Following the view that caregivers want to be helpful, their helpfulness should also be reflected in the internal prosodic pattern of CDS. In the current study, we firstly focused on how caregivers adjust their speaking rate depending on children's lexical knowledge. In daily life interactions, caregivers not only talk about words that the children already knew, for example, elephant, but they also often introduce words that are unknown to children and potentially needed to be learned, like Lima in this case. So if caregivers want to be helpful and provide contextual support to children, they may, with speaking rate, highlight the words they perceive to be unknown to their child. A previous study conducted by Han with 2-year-old Dutch-speaking children and their mother has indeed found that Dutch mother slowed down significantly for unknown words. However, she did not control for the frequency of words in daily life. The studies has found that highly frequent words were usually produced faster than those with lower frequency, and unknown words are generally less frequent than known words. Therefore, without controlling for frequency, this may simply be a listener or a speaker-oriented effect. We also looked at the effect of displacement on CDS speaking rate. In real-life settings, besides talking about references that are present in the physical environment, a large part of the communication between caregivers and children happens when the referents were actually away. Thus, besides learning target reference in a situated context, children also need to be able to access the association between the label and the reference in a displaced context. For children, when the object were absent from the physical environment, it became less accessible. So they would need more cognitive effort to retrieve or build a connection between the label that the caregiver is producing and the corresponding object. They may also need to rely more on the information that is provided by the caregiver's verbal speech. Therefore, it is interesting to examine how the caregivers might adjust their speaking rate to help children in this context, which is not explored by the previous literature. Therefore, in the current study, we firstly asked whether English-speaking caregivers adjust their speaking rate when talking about objects that are unknown to their children or absent from the interaction. Furthermore, if caregivers indeed modulate their speaking rate, we're interested in whether such adjustment predict children's ability to recognize a word they have previously encountered. For our current study, we included 30 caregiver child diets from the eco-lung corpus. The corpus is still under development. It focuses on the language in a face-to-face multimodal environment, including semi-naturalistic interactions between the caregiver and their children or between two adults. All the participants in this corpus were English speaking. For the current study, we were interested in the interaction between English-speaking caregivers and their 3 to 4-year-old children. Two video cameras recorded the whole interaction, one focusing on the caregiver and the other focusing on the environment as a whole. The caregiver also have a clip-on microphone to record their speech. During the interaction, the caregivers were presented with toys to talk about, which are either known or unknown to the children. They were asked to talk about them in a natural way, just like how they usually interact with their children in daily life settings. Afterwards, the toys were taken away, and they were asked to continue to talk about the toys when they are absent. For example, in this video, the toys were present in the environment.
These are plays.
Well, in here, the toys were absent.
Saxophone. Saxophone. How does it go?
After the interaction, children were given a recognition test to measure how many unknown words they could recognize after talking about them. This is a sample trial from the test. The children first saw a puppet and then heard it saying,
"Can you help me find the lemur? Where is the lemur?"
Then we recorded which picture did the child point at. So in this case, the correct answer would be the left one. After we collected the speech, we transcribed and segmented them into utterances and words in Pratt. An utterance in this case corresponds to an event or predicate unit. We chose these two levels of analysis in order to have converging evidence and to see how robust our effects are. Our speaking rate was measured by the average number of syllables per second, and the pauses that are longer than 200 milliseconds within an utterance were excluded from the duration. As for what may affect children's word learning, we reasoned that what matters is how much the caregivers mark the unknown word, like how salient the unknown words are compared to known words. Thus, we looked at the ratio for known and unknown reference speaking rate, which is our measurement for the degree of modification for unknown reference. The recognition test outcome was measured by the proportion of test trial that child have answered correctly, so when they point at the correct picture. So do caregivers adjust their speaking rate? On utterance level, we found that caregivers tend to be slower when they were talking about unknown objects compared to known objects. Surprisingly, they were actually producing the whole utterance faster in displaced context, so when the objects were absent compared to situated context, when the toys were present. For our word level analysis, we again found that caregivers were significantly slower when producing unknown words compared to known words. However, different from our previous study, we found that caregivers actually tend to use a slower speaking rate for the particular words in displaced context compared to situated context. These results were found when we controlled for the age of the children, word frequency, number of mentions, word position, and session order. Here is an example of the caregiver's articulation. So this is an unknown word.
Papaya.
Or this is a known
Tomato.
word. And we can hear that the unknown word speaking rate were slower than the known word. Well, for the same word, this is in the toy absent condition.
Rhino.
And this is in the toy present condition.
Rhino.
Again, we can hear that the left one were generally slower than the right one. This is an illustration of the predicted value of speaking rate based on number of mention. We can see that as the number of mention increased, the speaking rate for both known and unknown word increased. Well, but still, known words are generally slower than, known words were generally faster than unknown words, and displaced articulate speaking rate in displaced context are generally slower than the situated context. So why do we find a difference on our utterance and word level analysis? Maybe it is that the caregivers speed up for all the words besides the label to provide the maximal amount of information to children. To analyze this, we conducted a post-hoc analysis looking at the utterance when the target words were taken out. For example, this is a whole utterance.
The antelope is a bit like the deer that you've got.
And we will take out the target reference, so antelope, and analyze the rest of the utterance. And we found that indeed speaking rate was faster when we excluded the target word. Therefore, based on this result, we suggest that caregivers may increase their speaking rate within the utterance to provide information, while at the same time, they would slow down for the particular word, so in this case, antelope, to maintain the salience of the target label. And then, since we found that caregivers indeed modulate their speech, we're also interested in whether such modulation predict children's word learning, which in this case is measured by the recognition test outcome. We found a significant correlation between speaking rate ratio for the words and children's recognition test result. And this effect still holds when we controlled for children's age and the average number of mentions for unknown words. As we can see from the plot on the right, that the bigger the speaking rate ratio between known and unknown word, that is, the more salient the unknown word is, the better the children's recognition test result. So the better that for them to retrieve a word they just previously learned. Therefore, in our study, we firstly asked, do caregivers adjust their speaking rate? Indeed, we found that on word level, caregivers were slower for unknown or displaced words, while on the utterance level, they are slower for those that are related to unknown objects, while they are those that included unknown words, while they are faster when they were in a displaced context. In general, our results suggest that caregivers do dynamically adjust their speaking rate based on their perception of children's lexical knowledge and the context of the interaction, maybe in order to help children or facilitate children in word learning. And secondly, whether such adjustment predict children's ability to recognize a word they previously encountered. Again, yes, we found that the greater the adjustment made to unknown word, the better the immediate learning results. So the more that the caregiver marks the unknown words, the more that the unknown word is salient, the better for the children to learn these words that they just previously heard. And that's all. Thank you.